You're listening to the Jim Boy Star Podcast, episode 89, titled Dragon Warrior for Life Part 1, guest starring Kenshin 1913. Welcome everyone, this is Jim, and it's time for the Jim Boy Star Podcast, and more specifically, the first mini-series. I have Kenshin 1913, aka Pete, with me. How are you doing?
Doing good, and how about yourself?
Good. I'm glad we're going to get to talk about Dragon Warrior 4 in great detail. Why don't you give a little bit of a breakdown of how this is working?
Well, Dragon Warrior 4 was a NES game that was released in February of 1990 in Japan, and eventually in 1992 in America. And this game was much different than its predecessors in the essence that it had 5 chapters. You got to play as 8 different characters, and like the story, each chapter got bigger. So like the first chapter was kind of quick; you could probably get done in about an hour and a half, and so on and so forth until the 5th chapter, which was bigger than all the other 4 combined. And the nice thing about it was it added like another world. It also added like they already had flying mechanics and stuff, but there was just extra stuff, and the colors in this game were a little more vibrant than they were in the first 3 games. And this also started a brand new trilogy called the Zenithian Trilogy.
Correct. Yeah, we had talked about the first trilogy when we talked about Dragon Warrior 1, 2, and 3. And specifically for this show, we're going by chapter here. So in this episode, you're only getting chapter 1, and so on and so forth. So obviously you play Let's Plays of all the Dragon Warrior games. How many remakes were there of this game that you can recall?
Well, there are 3 remakes, and they're all pretty much the same game. You know, they didn't really change a ton from one version to the other like they did with Dragon Warrior 3. Pretty much there's the one for the Nintendo. Then when Dragon Warrior 7 came out, there was a little ad on the back of the manual saying that Dragon Warrior 4 was going to come out for the PlayStation 1. Sadly, that never ended up coming out, so that was the remake. And then pretty much when they came out for the DS and the Android or iOS, the mobile device, those are pretty much the same thing, but just like, you know, a little different in the essence of like the way they had to make it like vertical, right, rather than, you know, the square and touch controls and all that stuff. So there's been three remakes of it.
Okay, now there is one big change that I would like to address right off the bat, which is the changing of the names.
That's a big change.
It's a big change. What we're going to do in regards to this miniseries is we're going to call them by the Nintendo names, but we'll also bring up what the remake names would wind up being.
Right.
Another big difference, if I recall, which I'm not a fan of, was the accent of characters now in this one.
Yeah. See, the thing about this game was originally, you know, obviously it was just pretty much English or whatnot. And then when they remade it for, I don't know about the PlayStation version because I never ended up getting a chance to play that. But for the DS and the mobile versions, they ended up adding accents to the characters. Like they made each character from a specific region, and they all each had like different accents. Like Ragnar, his was, I believe, Scottish.
Okay.
Like Elena and her group, they were Russian. Then you had Talon. I think he was also Scottish, or it could have been Irish.
Well, I mean, we could always double check on that when those chapters.
Right. 4, they were like from Spain or like India or whatever, and then 5 was just pretty much all around the world. But yeah, they added that. And thing about accents, when you read them, it's a lot harder to understand what the hell they're saying. But like if they had voice acting, that actually makes it, you know, a lot better because then you can actually appreciate the accents and all that. Sure. But having to read it was a real pain in the butt.
Oh my God. Also, I've noticed on the remakes is, and I don't think much of it happens in Chapter 1, but the game gets a little more punny, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll dive into that. Do you have any reason, do you have any knowledge of why any of these changes have happened? Whether it's the more puns, the changing of names. Do you know if there was any type of rhyme or reason behind this decision?
I think because the localization crew that they used in Dragon Quest VIII, pretty much from then they were going back from that game forward, and then when they went back and remade everything, they pretty much tried to get everything, like all the names of the spells, they tried to get those all, all the same, rather than like, you had heal and then heal more, and now it's like more heal or whatever.
Right.
And the puns, I'm not exactly sure. That really didn't start until Dragon Quest IX, where you saw a lot of puns. There were like a lot of them, and I don't know. They probably just went back and they just kind of like added some extra stuff into it.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they would do that. I'm not sure. But I guess it kind of adds another like unique humor to it.
Right. All right. So let's start off. We go through, just like always, we go through the story. So why don't you start us off here?
Right. So just two quick little things I want to add about Dragon Quest, the remakes, was that they did add a 6th chapter, which was like a bonus chapter, which we'll get to when we get to it, but I just wanted to let people know. And then they added an addition that's only available right now in the mobile versions or even the PlayStation version, but, no one can get that, where they added party talk, which is really, really interesting. I think we'll probably talk more about that when we do the 2nd chapter of this game.
Right, because, and that'll start off with this one, is that this is a chapter that has a format that we're very familiar with. It's one person.
Right. So the first chapter we pretty much play as a soldier who's dressed in pink. He's the most badass guy who's ever been in pink. His name is Ragnar. Now in the subsequent versions, they gave him a last name, McRyan, and so he's pretty much a knight in Berlin.
Right.
And what's happening is apparently there are children that have gone missing in the town of Izmit. And pretty much the king has ordered the soldiers to figure out what is going on. So as Ragnar, you pretty much explore Berlin and Izmit and try to figure out what's going on. And the beautiful thing about it is this game also has a day-night system. So there are interesting things happening during the day and the night.
They definitely take advantage of that whole system, absolutely.
Exactly. So there's only certain information that you can get at night versus in the day, and so you have to do a little bit of exploring. So Ragnar, he heads off to the village of Izmit to figure out what's going on.
Well, hold on before we get too far, because I definitely have a lot of comments, and I warned people about this. That I have a lot of
right.
thoughts.
Yeah, well, this is your favorite, so
yes. So I want to address, what are your thoughts on the fact that the King of Berlin or whatever? So the scene starts off when he's addressing all the soldiers. Why is Ragnar the only one that's not blue in the NES version?
I think because he's the captain of the knights there.
Maybe
he's like a royal knight versus all those other guys are just regular knights. Maybe.
Okay, I buy that absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of. Now, why he would choose pink, like a pink armor, I'm not sure. But again, he's like really badass.
Oh, he's definitely badass. But I really want to know if it was the king that chose the pinkish or the pink outfit, or was it Ragnar himself?
Right. Well, I think because like he's the captain. Because in this game they have two different types of colors of knights. They have the blue ones and then the orange guys. The orange guys are like the foot soldier dudes, and then the blue guys would probably be the knights. And then Ragnar's pretty much the head of those knights. I would think he's a step above those knights.
Yeah, I would agree. But with that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So no, and then like you said, you explore the town, and I remember there being that old man that would follow you, but I forgot why he followed you.
He said he wanted to be a knight, and so he ended up just following you. You could walk around town, and he would like literally follow you. That was pretty cool.
I think it's a little hypocritical that he says, "I would love to be a knight." He followed you until you go outside to where the battle actually begins.
Yeah, and then he's nowhere to be found.
Right.
Nowhere. One thing I do have to mention in Burland is that there's a lady there, right? And she's wondering where her husband went. So that's something that you got to kind of like, okay, keep that in the back of your mind.
Right.
Apparently he went to the village of Izmit, and he hasn't been seen.
But
his name is...
Sorry, go ahead.
I think his name is Alex.
It
I don't
is.
remember what his name is in the remakes.
And apparently, isn't some other guy already trying to move in on this woman?
Yes, if you come in at night, there's already a guy trying to... I think her name was Flora or something like that trying to like hit on her and everything. And she's like, no, Alex will be back.
That's right. So not even probably 10 minutes into this game, you have a possibility of adultery.
Right, exactly. So we travel through a cave, a big cave. It's, pretty much at this point, the game obviously is very easy. You're running into different groups of enemies. Most of them, can be taken out one hit or whatnot. Because Ragnar, he's the type of character, he doesn't get any spells. He's pretty much a soldier, like in Dragon Quest III. He gets really good armor, really good weapons, but his speed's a little low, but he gets a lot of great stuff to equip, lots of HP, lots of strength, lots of defense. So he's going through the cave, and as you go through, you meet other soldiers that are around, or other knights that are around, and you kind of talk to them about some of the whereabouts of where the kids might be. Mm-hmm. So you finally get to the town of Izmit, and there's a school there. There's a bunch of kids missing, and when you talk with the teacher, he says to come back at night, which is one of the big things about like then you gotta go outside, go at night.
Right.
But they also have a jail there where some guy is being held. Apparently he thinks he's a child. He had the case of amnesia because he got attacked by monsters or something. Mm-hmm. So he's in jail. Anyways, so you wait till night, you go talk to the old man or the school teacher. I believe he says something about how like the kids like to play something and
by a well or something like that.
By a well, but actually I think he says that they hung out with the guy who's in jail. So then when you go talk to the guy in jail, if you talk to him at night, he reveals that his name was Alex or something. So you're like, oh.
Right.
So what you end up doing is travel back to Burnland, and you talk to the girl, and you pretty much bring her over to see her husband, where she smacks the crap out of him. And
right.
then he totally...
Okay, so yeah, I remember this, and I don't know if that was supposed to be a slap or an actual kiss, because sometimes kiss is used as smack as well.
Right. That's something when I was a kid, I didn't know what it was either. I was like, is it a smack, or are they slapping him, or are they kissing? What's the deal? And then I just always assumed it was probably a slap, just because I feel like back in the day, or like, that would probably knock him back to his senses. Although maybe a kiss would do the same thing.
So wonder what you think. You think she put her arm in the jail cell and then tried to wind it up enough for a smack?
Yeah, maybe. I think that's possibly what could have happened.
All right, go ahead.
So he comes back to his senses, and he pretty much says, "Hey, I used to hang around with the kids, and the kids, they played in this well that's in the forest, which is there's a sign outside. It's so many spaces over from the sign. So you go to this little forested area, because you can't go there without learning that information. It's sort of like a trigger.
Right. So
you go there, and you go into the well, and that's when you hear like these weird voices. And so you're following the voices, and inside the well, you can do two things. One, there's a certain part where if you don't follow the voice, you can actually head over to a what would you call it? Like a special character that you actually get in the game.
Sure.
His name is Healy, or he's basically a heel slime. And he's very, very important for this chapter because he can heal up Ragnar. Obviously, the only way he can heal himself is if he's carrying like medical herbs or whatever. So he's a very important character. And actually, their friendship, Ragnar and Healy, is actually like something that a lot of Dragon Quest fans like love throughout the series, throughout all the series and stuff, because they're like good buddies. So Healy wants to become a human, and he figures that if he hangs around with a human, he'll be able to do so.
I was gonna say, like, what basis does he make this theory from?
I don't know. I have no idea. I just think like, oh, maybe if I hang around with him, you know.
Like, imagine that. Hey, Pete, I'm gonna hang around with a pilot that flies airplanes. Maybe if I hang around with him long enough, I'll actually be able to fly an airplane. Like,
yeah,
that's the kind of logic Healy's trying to pull here. But also, what I always thought was very interesting about this is that Healy it's basically the first person or first monster character that you would have as a friend.
Right.
In the entire series, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I read that that people love the ability to get Healy and have him in your group for that part of the game. Kind of made it, kind of like almost spawned a whole new like branch of Dragon Quest games through Dragon Quest Monsters, and hell, even Dragon Quest V is a little bit like, okay, you got this. They kind of took this aspect of this game here and then made it bigger. Like in Dragon Quest V, you pretty much at a certain point in the game you can actually recruit monsters to be in your group, and I think they got it from like the Healy and Ragnar.
That makes sense because like this was one of the only time that we at this point saw that a monster could be a friend and not an enemy.
Yeah, because you always thought that they were pretty much bad and they were no good.
Which was one of my biggest issues with Dragon Quest Heroes. Without spoiling it too much, it's basically like all the monsters turn bad is the main storyline. And I sat there and I'm like, guys, the monsters, like 80% of the time are bad. You should not be surprised by this. For every Healy, there's about 10 other enemies for that one friend.
Exactly.
But when this started, this was the first one, Healy. It was the first monster friend. And then apparently we find out that shoes can talk.
Yes. Well, actually, you know what's interesting about that is that if you do a little party talk, if you're playing, like at this point in the game, if you're playing on like a remake version, except the DS, this is why I'm not a huge fan of the DS version, because they don't have the party talk.
Well, I know you're all about party talk.
I'm all about party talk because I find that it helps like bring more personality to the characters and everything. Like it's just fun to hear what other people have to say, and especially with this game where each character is so different from the other, and like personality-wise and all this cool stuff, that it's interesting to hear their personalities and stuff like that.
I agree with you because also like when something happens, you can go to Party Talk and see specifically what the character thought of what just happened.
Right, and also sometimes they give you a hint or a clue on what to do next.
Right.
So with the Party Talk, you actually talk to Healy, and Healy kind of mentions how there's like fairies down there.
Oh.
Like it's kind of interesting. You never meet them. So once you get Healy, you got to kind of get back on track and keep following the voices, and eventually you get to these shoes, and they're called I forget what they're called in the DS version, or tabula or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And they're flying shoes pretty much. So you get these shoes, and this is pretty much how the kids have disappeared, because these like fairies or whatever have had them get the shoes. So after that, you walk out of the the well or whatever, and you use these shoes, and you're warped to this tower that is just west of Izmit. And up there, you find out that monsters are stealing the kids from town. And you're like, what the hell? So you travel through the tower, and you meet some soldiers there, who one of them one of them's like, "Oh, I wish I took Healy with me," and he's like, "Ragnar, you lucky bastard," you know. And then as you continue to travel down, you get some really nice gear for Ragnar at this point.
Right.
And you meet one guy right before the bottom, and he pretty much tells you that in his dying breath that like pretty much the monsters are taking children, and they're pretty much killing them because they're worried about this hero that's going to come out, and he might destroy the leader of evil, or the Lord of the Underworld, or whatever it is.
Right.
So then in his dying breath, he tells Ragnar to protect all children. So you head downstairs.
That's quite a mission. I mean,
right.
Imagine if someone said to you, "I need you to protect all the children in the world."
I'd be like, "There's not enough of me. I'm gonna need some help," you know.
Right. It should also be mentioned, this tower, you also, just like the well, you also couldn't get to this tower until you had the shoes.
Right,
you
because
mentioned that.
Yeah, because it was surrounded by like a little, lake or whatever you want to call it. So you go downstairs into the basement, and you meet the monster who's stealing who's taking the kids and then killing them or whatever. Anyways, so they got 2 kids there. Those are the 2 kids, two or three. I think it's 2 kids. They got 2 kids, and you fight them. Now, interestingly enough, one of the guys is called Sorrow's Shadow.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this always confused me as a kid, especially as you got through the game and you figured out who the main villain was.
Sure. I'm glad you're bringing this up, because I had the exact same thing in mind.
Yeah, because it's like Sorrow's Shadow. This guy doesn't look anything like him. I always figured that it's pretty much just like one of his underling guys.
Mm-hmm.
Or something like that, rather than he's Sorrow's actual shadow.
Well, yeah, and I was like, well, wait, if it's his shadow, how does he have the ability to pull a Peter Pan where his shadow is basically its own thing?
Right. Yeah, that was always weird to me, so I always just assumed it was like his underling or something.
So, like, you're saying, like, how I don't remember what job I had that had this. Oh, no, I know what it was. I used to do college radio, and it was, an FM station, and when I was learning how to work the board and everything, they used to call it shadowing.
Yeah.
You're learning. So you're thinking that it's equivalent to that. Like that he's Sorrow's right-hand guy and supposedly learning from him?
Yeah. that's not a bad theory. I just always figured it was one of his underlings, but yeah, definitely he was, Sorrow wants these kids dead because he doesn't want a hero to be born or whatever.
This shadow must have just started, because
exactly
he was very, very weak. And who was the other guy?
There was some eye fellow. I forget what he was, like a giant eyeball, and he used to do a thing where if he got really mad, he would turn a different color, and he could actually hit you for a critical, which could be very nasty.
Right.
So after you defeat them, hopefully you have Healy in your group, because he's like really important for healing you if like you get some nasty damage.
Can you actually do a no Healy run?
You probably could. You definitely could. You'd have to level up a good amount.
I figured some like invisible plot wall would happen, and like you wouldn't be able to get out of the well.
No, I think you could go through it without getting Healy. The thing about it is, like, if you get to the top of the tower, like, let's say you want to leave the tower, you could just jump off, or leave through the bottom floor, use the shoes when you walk out, go on the top, and then jump off. And then you could always go and get him if you wanted to.
Hey, if you want to do another Let's Play of Dragon Warrior 4, like a special edition, a no Healy run, and see how. Yeah,
maybe I could try that for like the first chapter, just to see how it would work.
Yeah, dude, I wonder if you can, like, if the game kind of makes it somewhat impossible to do it without Healy. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just hard enough where you can probably get some hits in, but you have to level up a ridiculous amount in order to actually pull it off.
Yeah, you definitely have to get the best gear that they have in the area. Like, that's one thing you got to kind of worry about since you're just one dude. You kind of got to buy like a lot of the gear to make sure that you're not getting hurt.
Do you remember what? Do you remember what the best gear was for Ragnar?
At this point, I think it was like a scale shield.
All right.
You get this sword. The sword in the original game was called the Sword of Malice, right? So I never, ever, ever equipped it because I'm like, oh, this thing's cursed. So I was always stuck with like the, I forget what it was. It might have been a chain sickle or something. But yeah, you get half plate armor, you get the scale shield, and you get like an wooden helmet. And then I forget what the weapon is. But in the tower, you get this really amazing sword, which was eventually renamed the Cautery Sword. And the nice thing about that is if you use that in battle, it casts like, I think it was like Fireball or whatever, which hits a group of enemies, which is very nice. It's actually very useful because it's like a multi-attack thing, and you only have one guy who can only attack one thing. So it kind of gives you a little more strategy in battles.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Ragnar and Healy fight. Unless you're doing a no Healy run, they fight these two guys. They win. Now what happens?
We rescue the kids, and we head back. We head back to the top of the tower, and then jump off, like I said, and then we head back to Izmit, or Strathbelly, as it's called in the other versions. And what is it? You pretty much, the kids go back to their moms. They're all pumped, and you talk to some of the soldiers. They're like, good job, Ragnar. I think there's one guy who's kind of like a little jealous. He's like, oh no, it's not until you get to Burnland, because then you walk back. And during this whole period, there's no monsters or anything. And so you head back, and then there's one guy in Berlin. He's like, hey, can I take the credit? And if you say yes, he's like, nah, I won't do that anyways. And then if you tell him no, he's like, yeah, good job. So you go back to the king, and the king's like, you can have any reward you want. And Ragnar's like, my reward is I want to go on a journey to find the hero. So what the king does is he gives you this nice boost of experience. Because by the time you're done with it, you're probably you might be on like level 8 or 9, maybe even 10. Mm-hmm. I can't see being much higher than that. But yeah, and then he gives you like this nice chunk of experience that brings you up like 5-6 levels.
All right, so let's theorize about something now.
Right.
So we know that he's giving Ragnar experience points, but we also know the way you get experience points is usually you go and you actually defeat monsters. So, and I've always looked at that as, well, you're getting experience points because like it's kind of like working out.
Mm-hmm.
What is this equivalent to when the king just gives you experience points?
That's a good question. Maybe he's shooting Ragnar with some sort of steroids or some performance-enhancing drugs or something. And he's like, here you go, buddy.
You're not under my watch anymore. No drug test for you.
Yeah, pretty much you can do what you want. You're taking... Pretty much at this point, Ragnar asks for like a leave of absence.
Yeah, right?
He's like, I gotta go do another mission, find this hero guy or girl. Hero kid.
I like that you brought in the whole like shooting him up with stuff, because I innocently came into this just thinking, I don't know, maybe Ragnar just does jumping jacks while he's standing there. Like that was my theory, but I like yours way more.
Yeah, well, Ragnar probably lifts some weights or something, but yeah, I think the king just gives him some like some performance enhancing stuff. Yeah.
And he goes with Healy, like he leads with Healy, right?
Yep.
And no one's like, oh, what's this monster doing here, not attacking everyone?
Yeah, that's one weird thing. Like when you go into town, that no one ever is like, oh, you've got a monster behind you. You know that?
That's not. I feel like that's not true. I feel like there's been a game in the Dragon Warrior series where you do bring a monster around, and the villagers are freaked out. Maybe it's this game, and I just don't remember. It's not Healy, I know that much, but maybe it's this game or another game that I feel like. I don't know. I just feel like that has been addressed at least in one situation.
I know in I know in Dragon Warrior 3, when you use the Staff of Change, like it's one of these items that you get, and you can change into like fairies and dwarves and monsters and all that. If you end up turning into a group of monsters, people will say, "Oh my God, there's a monster," and stuff like that.
Maybe that is what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, that might be it, and that happens in this game too.
It does
when you get the Staff of Change, I believe.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm sure we'll get to that. So
yeah.
Ragnar and Healy leave. Healy still convinced that just being with someone will make you turn into that species.
Right.
Overall thoughts on Chapter 1?
I think Chapter 1 probably one of my favorite chapters, just because it's kind of like the tutorial. Like if you're not playing the remake versions, this is kind of the tutorial chapter where it's like, okay, here's how the mechanics work. Here's pretty much the basic Dragon Warrior thing. Simple story, you can get through it pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably the best character like start a game off with, is like a guy who can really wreck some stuff.
Yeah,
and it's just like a simple story. I really like it.
I mean, yeah, I think you said it best. It's a simple story. You're not going into a cave that actually has like 5 to 10 different ways to go where you can get lost and then you die just because you got lost and whatnot. It's pretty straightforward, but also interesting with the whole, you have a friend named Healy. And like you said, not too long. It is a very, very good first chapter for someone that just kind of wants to get a feel if they might actually like this. Because then in Chapter 2, you kind of get a little bit more of a advanced story. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you were in at this point, then you're probably going to be in for the next chapter. If you're out at this point, well, then you're out. Like it's a very good standard to set, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree.
All right, so this was the shorter show, but where can people find you?
People can find me at Kenshin1913 on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook.
All right, everyone, thank you for listening to Dragon Warrior for Life, the mini-series. Catch you next time. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Jim Boy Star podcast. Please visit the website www.thatspodcasting.com, where you can get the latest news on all of the latest upcoming episodes of this show, and you could download the archives of previous episodes, and don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher for the latest episodes coming right to you right when they're released. You can also follow me at www.twitter.com/JimBoyStar. This is my story, and thank you for being a part of it.